That would.
Coming up the top of hour two, David Macchiari.
So let me call the meeting to order. First item is we have the minutes from the July meeting. And they were sent out a couple of days ago, but if members of the committee haven't read them yet, let's take 1 minute and review them. And if there are any changes, please say so. Otherwise, I'll assume they're accepted. All good? Okay, moving on. The first item of business, and Rich Wiltz is on the line, and I'm going to turn this over to him very quickly. But what we are doing, and as a committee, is looking at various options for turf I'll just leave it as the broad category of turf maintenance. But that includes nutrition, it includes weed control, it includes everything that we can do to maintain our turf, and also satisfy some of the concerns about maybe some of the chemicals that are used on the turf historically for maintenance. Rich has been working with Dr. Brown, who lives in Pinecone. Dr. Brown has an extensive resume dealing with a lot of different, probably more range management type techniques, but still he's familiar with the science. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rich, and maybe you can explain to the group where you're heading with the work you're planning up at High Point next summer.
Sure.
Rich, all yours.
Yeah, we've been discussing for some time running a test using organics just to see what kind of a result we would get, and decided that a good place to run the test would be in the area that's to the south of our unit, between our unit and the next building over. If you take all the space in there, subtract out the flower bed, it's right at 5,000 square feet. So we felt like that was, a decent amount of area to run a good test, and it was big enough that we could with some degree of reasonableness see whether the results were good or not. But we want to use iron chelate as the weed management vehicle, and we will kind of yet to determine what other organic nutrients we'll use, along with the iron chelate. And as Mark mentioned, this will be for next spring, and Dr. Brown and I kind of work out all the details here in the next couple of months, and get prepared to do the application at the appropriate time then in the spring, and we'll be able to monitor it throughout next year's growing season then and see how it does. But at this stage of the game, that's really about all I have to say about it. Any questions?
I might add, Rich, that the second piece of that puzzle is the fertilizer piece. And that will be, and we're looking at an organic fertilizer like Milorganite. And because that, nitrogen in, nitrogen out, we have to have nitrogen added to the grass, or the grass will just become blonde thin, and best way to have weeds is with poor turf. So
right, and we want to be able to determine, what the right blend is and everything for the ground that we have here. And, but we'll see what we come up with.
So, and why don't I just save all the questions till the end for homeowners' comments? That way we can move through the meeting in a smooth, fast way. We will see how this goes. You know, one of the things, you know, turf management has been a big topic all summer long. The committee posted a report last month. And I will just suffice it to say that we have had a lot of input, more than I expected. And without going through all the details of the input, I think as a general statement that homeowners are overwhelmingly supportive of what our mission is in terms of maintenance of a landscape that's pleasing to owners and its guests. So with that, I'll just move on. The next topic will be general maintenance, and this is, I see Ryan's here today. I asked him why he dared show up, but he's here, so now the monkey's on his back. But you know, I just thought we'd have a general discussion on general maintenance. I guess my first question though is we've seen some new faces, and maybe you could just and you know, faces do wear the shirt, so it's good. That's a good thing that owners know that it's Tamarron Maintenance. But maybe Ryan or Bobby, you could just explain where we are now with your staff on grounds. I noticed there's a new catfish, and he's doing a great job. But you know, just how you're approaching the staffing on the maintenance this summer.
So the summer we use some seasonal guys.
Up here with the microphone. Yeah.
This summer we had some seasonal help for mowing. We used some teenagers that were off for the summer from school. They're now back to school, so they're not around anymore. We have a new weeding guy. His name is Bobby Pop. You guys have probably seen him around. He's done a great job in the flower beds. By the time he gets from Gamble Oak to Pine Cone to High Point, by the time he's done the High Point, he goes back down and start again in Gamble. The weeds seem to like to grow, so he's probably going to stick around after he's done weeding to go in to help us shovel. He wants to keep working. So other than that, it's all we got right now. We're down one mower, but the season's going down. The grass isn't growing like it should. We haven't got the rain, so mowing isn't as heavy now as it was last year. But I think it looks decent for what we're working with. We do have some sprinkler issues Ryan can address. If you guys have any questions on that. There's in a lot of the areas, there's 50 zones of sprinklers basically in each area. You can only run one zone at a time. And with the water pressure in 24 hours in the day, Ryan can explain why we can't run more than one zone at a time, and stuff like that. But yeah, does that help answer questions?
Is Bobby full-time or part-time?
Bobby's 20 hours a week
right now.
right now. Yep.
I saw Bobby this morning, and I don't want to be the guy that says I told you so, but I told you so. And the center and Pinecone may have a similar situation, but Bobby has said to me, you know, Mark, the problem with the center bed at Gamble Oak is this damn fabric that you've got there. I can't get down to the roots of the weeds. And Bobby suggested to me this morning, and is he a hobby or gardener? Or just,
He's a hobby gardener.
but he seems to know more than the average person about
Yeah.
gardening. And he said his recommendation would be that we clear out the bed later this fall, like we've thought about doing before. And so it's prepared and ready to go for new plantings in the spring. But he said he just can't keep up with it. And I saw him, he's got everything separated now. He's spent hours on it, but if you look in between the plants, it's just ready to explode again tomorrow. As soon as we get a rain, it'll explode. If we ever get a rain, it'll explode.
Yeah.
But so that's one thing. Another item that I just have to ask. So last fall, we spent a bunch of money on wildfire mitigation. By we, I mean Tamarron, and they did a darn good job. And it's, you know, we haven't had a lot of rain this summer, but I'll call it the fuzz is coming back. The small gambles are coming back. I've noticed in a lot of places where we had gambles and a lot of shade, now it's being replaced with thistle. Is there a way that internally we can maintain that? We don't want to have one of those saws that people that are dangerous, safety's first. But they do have things that are something like a notch up from a weed eater. They have a plastic blade. Is that something that we can probably for a few $100s acquire and maintain this this fire mitigation and keep the, so we don't have to spend 5 figures, healthy 5 figures again to do it all over again?
Yeah, we should be able to knock that out a couple times a year, you know, hit those spots and keep them down.
And there's another thing in the back of my mind that Rick will smile when he hears about, maybe he won't smile, maybe he'll cry. But I suspect this fall, we will be having people from insurance companies come out to evaluate our property for insurance risk. And it would be really good to be able to point to some of these areas and say how well we're controlling wildfire mitigation, which means sooner than later.
Okay.
Rick, do you have any thoughts on that? I know I've been asked wildfire, almost every insurance person I talk to.
You know, before, when I'd spoken to Jennifer, she had said there really wasn't anything we could do that would increase our rating. We were as good as we could give with the golf course surrounding us in the highway and then the river on the other side of Glacier. So from the standpoint of big projects, there's nothing else we could do, you know, but the stuff that we did last year just helps us internally.
Yeah. And if there's anything else that may pop up, but last year we did a lot.
And we just talked about it. Tree trimming is on our list of things to do this fall.
Any other comments from the committee on general maintenance? I think, you know, the shrubs look good. They've been trimmed. Grass is good, you know, it's sometimes spots seem to be missed, so I just, you know, do a nice orderly progress and get all the spots all along the line. I think it may be a communication between the big mower and the little mower, and it's yours, no, it's yours, and then it's no one's.
I do have a question. Up at High Point, and I sent you the email. Shrubs along the right side were completely cut down rather than just cutting.
By right side?
Yeah,
What do you mean by right side?
the northeast side of High Point parking lot.
Oh, talk about that. That was the rocks.
Oh, the rocks, yeah. So we were working up there to trim some of the shrub back.
Yeah.
And those juniper shrubs.
Yeah,
And once we got up there, we realized that there were huge boulders under those junipers
Yeah.
that were completely covered.
Yeah.
And so being that those junipers are extremely voracious, they do grow back quickly and are very hardy. We decided to cut it back to kind of expose some of those boulders that no one could ever see before. So we did trim those down quite a bit.
well, they were completely cut down to the base.
Yeah, and then they will come back.
Okay,
So we wanted to just try that out because it's something that no one could see and it's a great landscaping asset, actually.
and then the little spruce tree that you go on the, you know, the little walkway that's dying right now, unfortunately. So just letting you know.
Okay, I'll take a look at that.
But, you know, we'll get to boulders in a second, but so everyone knows I'm a geologist. And when Bobby and Ryan called me up and said, hey, look at what we found, I chose the boulders over the junipers, knowing the boulders wouldn't grow taller.
The junipers are big water.
Junipers will win.
Junipers and cedars.
But if you go up there and look, they're beautiful boulders. I don't know where they were brought in from. They've got great appearance. They've got pegmatites, which is you know, a billion years ago where we had lots of volcanic activity filling the cracks of the boulders and their differential colors. They're beautiful boulders to go look at least for a geologist.
And to have those brought in would have been really
God
expensive.
knows, how did they build the pyramids? They're huge. So let's move on to boulders. This is something we've been talking about for a lot, especially down in Gamble, where we have some owners that don't like the fact that during loading and unloading periods, people will drive their car in the grass and be tired unloading their car and go to sleep, and the person can't get down their walk the next day. Boulders are on the agenda. I've been to the highway department here a few weeks ago. And if anyone that leaves the Gamble entrance, if you look across at the base of the Hermosa Cliffs, there's lots of big boulders. I would talk to the highway fellow about that. They would be pleased to give those boulders to Tamaron so they don't have to spend a bunch of money hauling them away. What they have to do though is they're so big that they will have to go in somehow and reduce those boulders. And he will be notifying me. It'll happen sometime this fall. When that happens, we'll coordinate with BHP. The big thing is BHP cannot cross 550 and go retrieve those boulders. It's just not safe. But the highway department will bring them over. BHP can collect them. We'll place some boulders at Gamble along the center island. This year, we didn't have people drive there and park their RVs on the grass in the center island. Last year we did, but we'll make sure it never happens again. There are owners that would like boulders put in the grassy area in front of their place so people don't park in front of them. We will place the boulders there, making sure that it doesn't interfere with snow removal. It'll give a landscape, it'll have a practical purpose. It'll have an aesthetic purpose. And at High Point and Pinecone, any owners that think that there's that situation there, or they'd like to see a boulders to add dimension to your property, say the word. There's an awful lot of boulders across the street, and there'll be those blocky limestone boulders. I think they'll look really good.
Did they give you a time?
They didn't, but what I'll do is I'll probably go down, you know, squeaky wheels. I'll go down and bug them here in another week or so. They probably have other things to do.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on, the ornamental beds there. I hope I see the difference. It's always been a fetish with me, but from now versus say 3, 4, 5 years ago, the ornamental beds to me are two different worlds. At least they are at Gamble and High Point. Now, next year, we'll also include Pinecone in the remediation effort. Pinecone folks, speak up what you want. But, you know, they're still pretty crowded, I think.
Yeah.
And again, the objective is simple. Native vegetation, low water, easy maintenance. That's where we're trying to go with it.
Are we still looking at Bloomings for that?
I don't know.
Do we
You
get
know,
quotes from other people?
I guess that's a good question that these guys need to answer. We have Bobby Pop now. What do you think? Do you think that that's something that you and maybe with a little bit of equipment he can handle? Blooming was not cheap.
Yeah, I
It's
think
not cheap.
we're looking at some other options.
Well, maybe what you could do is just think that there's 2 or 3 at Pinecone, maybe replanting the center one at Gamble. Come up with a number and we'll compare it with Blooming's number.
Maybe even look at, if we don't decide we want to do it, look at other people just beside Blooming and see if we get other quotes.
We should get multiple quotes on
multiple
everything.
quotes. I mean, not that Blooming didn't, but we have a lot of time to plan right now. Just a suggestion. But maybe see what else is out there. And just see if we can get some other quotes this year. Just a
Well,
suggestion.
I think as a general proposition that there's going to be more pressure on the budget this year than there was last year. And if we can do it internally, I think we'd be well served.
And I think we
I
could
think
do
so.
it internally. I mean, watching Blooming design last year, I mean, they
Yeah.
cleaned the bed and they planted plants. We can do that.
Well,
you know.
Yeah, I know you're happy at High Point. I'm not. I mean, I think the gardens and you live, those people who live at High Point, you can look at the gardens. I don't think they look very good at all. And, of course, they're now due to the heat and everything, they're practically dead. So,
Yeah.
I'd say
You know,
start, with
face the facts.
seeing another company, I would say.
Well, I think it's what we choose to plant, and I think it's very important
Yes.
that they keep, if we don't water, it's gonna die here.
Yeah, another water.
And
is key.
we have had, this is my 5th summer here.
Yeah.
And what happened to the monsoons?
Yep.
So that's part of it, maybe it's this committee's fault that it's not raining. Because what we did, I think there's a reason. I went out and played golf at 4 o'clock yesterday. I figured that would surely make it rain, and it didn't.
Watch your car, yeah.
But what we did is we installed at a number of locations, the water sensors to shut off the sprinklers if we had too much water. Well, they haven't been very necessary this summer.
Mhm.
So that's probably what did it, is we installed water
Probably so.
sensors and it hasn't rained. I'm joking, but
Well, we can definitely talk about if we want to do it internally, and we can send out quotes, so we can get on that.
and the ask is, what would you like to see?
Yep.
Dan Dan's my neighbor a few doors down, so he gets to hear me way too often. But they planted what Dan has called black-eyed Susans earlier this spring. And anybody that walks through Gamble, it just jumps out at you. It hasn't had its 2 weeks. It's just, it never stops. And so if it comes back next spring, and Dan, you say it's a perennial, if it comes back next spring, there's a winner right there. Obviously the one that seems to be our plant is the Russian sage. It just seems to do so well everywhere. There's, in the early spring, there's a couple of them that are beautiful. I wish they were all summer long, but that lupin is just one of the most gorgeous flowers around. Others just, and my bias is against these bachelor buttons. They're 2 weeks that they look great, and then they become so aggressive that they just take over the flower bed. And that's what Bobby is fighting with right now, is trying to keep them from growing back. But any ideas? If another idea that it's been thrown out, and there have no fish have taken the bait, but is an owner adopt a flower bed program that would really save on maintenance costs. And as you know, Dan takes care of his. No one can do as good a job as a person can, taking taking pride of ownership and doing their own piece. And I'd like to see that program take off, but people have to step forward and say they're interested.
So I can get plants. A friend of mine is master gardener down at Estancia. You can go and look at the beds down there. They're gorgeous. And she's right now taking out a lot of the plants, and she can give them to us, to me, to the garden out in front of me. And so I would say that's a good start. Even, can put them in this fall, and then they'll be up for next, if that would be acceptable.
I think our rules say that you get authorization for Cameron Maintenance to do anything yourself, but I think that's authorization that would be given very quickly.
Right, because I'm concerned, because in that little garden in front of me, we had asked Blooming to put in certain plants, and she put in shrubs instead. So that was a concern. We didn't get what we asked for. So I love her organic concepts and everything like that, but it didn't work like we thought it would.
Yeah, it's not the
So-
first time we didn't, and not pointing at Blooming, we've asked
Yeah.
for things before and got
Sure.
annuals instead.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anyone noticed, Glacier planted a lot of annuals on this, on the come in this year, and
Yeah,
and they don't look very good. Annuals don't do well here, perennials that you can get
Perennials.
coming back to. That's all I have on that topic. Next is irrigation, I guess, the first qualifier is irrigation challenges, but there's other things, upgrades, moisture control, or shrub heads. Ryan, you want to talk about irrigation a little bit?
So, obviously, we haven't got much, if any, rain this year. It's been a challenge to keep the grass green. We're trying to stay on top of that as best we can. If we see something that gets somewhat brown, then we spend our time trying to get, heads adjusted and working, and sometimes to get things that just go wrong, or someone drives over something, or a kid might go out and grab a sprinkler. So that's a constant. And I don't think it looks too bad considering that we've had no rain, and we've turned everything on daily watering now. The one thing that is challenging here is, as Bob said, each area, Pinecone, High Point, Gamble, they have roughly 50 zones. And if we want to water every zone, that's 30 minutes per zone. We can only run one zone at a time because the water pressure is just not there. So if you run one zone at a time, that's basically 24/7. That's why you see some sprinklers running during the day, is we don't have an option to run all of them at night. It's just not possible. There is possibly an ability, I thought about this, and I did look at the manhole in Gamble, that we could turn up the water pressure. Since there is a pressure reducer in Gamble that takes your water pressure from like 175 PSI of what the main line is down to about 55 to 75 PSI. And if we wanted to invest maybe in a pressure reducer that maybe increases that up to, say, 110 PSI, we could maybe play with that and get a couple zones to run at the same time, which is a possibility. That's probably possible in Pinecone. It's definitely possible in Gamble. High Point, not so possible because the water pressure up there is just too low.
Be careful. That you don't blow, go up to 100 and then blow all your.
Right, or,
Right.
that's PVC, it might not hold that pressure, so. Something to think about, in the future. As we've said, we have installed moisture controllers, which have been essentially useless to us because we got no rain. We thought maybe that would come in, and then we did install, you want me to talk about the shrub head
Sure.
risers? We installed some shrub head risers in Gamble Oak on Mark's steps, and then in Rick's steps in High Point, and then I believe it was 861 in Pinecone, just to run those over the summer and into the winter to see if they'll survive a winter, because they do water nicely if we were to install those, but it does come with significant overhead and manpower to get that done. We want to see if they survive the winter and how that plays out before we might move forward with that.
Did you put those light shrub heads on all of them? I saw them on mine.
I did. I put them on yours. I put them on Rick's. I still have to put them on the 861 Pinecone.
Because that'll take, and the question is with, a 4-foot PVC upright pipe, will it take snow?
And then we also did do a lot of tree trimming and bush trimming this year. If you notice, the bushes were all trimmed. We did a lot of trimming behind Gamble Oak there with those big bushes back behind there. And we also probably have some dead trees that are standing in certain areas that we're gonna need to get a chainsaw out and trim those down this fall. Haven't come up with an exact plan on that, but something that we need to look at. That's all I have. Any questions?
I got one, just a comment. Before we do anything with the pressure relief valves, check and see where the property delineation is, because down in that manhole, I think, and Rick, you may know better than I do, that may be Glacier Club's.
I did talk to Logan,
Okay,
Logan from the water company now,
Logan Hartle.
Yeah, and he did say that those pressure reducers, once they come off the main line, those are basically ours. If we wanted to upgrade them, it would be our responsibility. And he was there with me, looking at that, so we're talking closely with him. That could be a conversation that the front office has with Glacier Club.
Let's make sure that everybody is on the same page, because my understanding is that it's Glacier Club's property right up to the meter, isn't it? Rick? I believe it's right up to the meter.
Well, before we do anything,
Yeah,
we'll
okay.
have long conversation to make sure everybody's on the same.
Okay.
And I'd move forward with that project incrementally, because the last you want to do is exceed the burst pressure of your pipes.
So we can talk about
There,
that.
so try to be more knowledgeable about that.
I have a comment for it. Does anyone have any questions for Ryan or Bobby regarding irrigation or yes, maintenance? Go ahead.
Okay, hi, I live at 642.
Okay.
And I have a immense area of yard. And when they put the transformer in front of my yard, I don't know what they did, but I actually need another shed because there's a large area that doesn't get any water. And I spoke with Ray once and Ray asked, is it possible to get one more shed? Because all this mix gets 30 minutes, period. And then the area on the other side of the sidewalk, there's 5 stations. So that is always green and they get 2.5 hours of watering in that small area.
Because of the zones are just so close together.
Exactly.
I know the yard you're talking about, and we do, that is kind of a tough spot because there aren't enough. Heads.
I know.
We would love to add some. Only concern I have is if we every time we add a head, that reduces the pressure in that zone. We could try, we can put it on the schedule and try
It's
that.
just a large area from the deck all the way out to the street where it gets no coverage.
It just doesn't
No,
reach
and
there.
they planted a new tree there because I've lost aspen trees because there's no rain. And I don't know if this new tree is gonna make it or not.
Okay.
So, but I mean, if it's possible, I mean, I've been here for 21 years and this is an unusual situation everywhere.
Right.
And I just wondered if it would be possible to get just one more head that
We-
could cover some of that.
I haven't done that yet, but we could try, but I can't guarantee it
That's all
would
I
work.
ask, if
Okay.
it's possible.
Okay.
Thank you. Stacy.
Hi, my name's Diana McPeters and I live in Pinecone, H869. And our unit backs up right, in fact, we overlook the gold tees of the 7th pole of Glacier Valley.
869.
So we're right there. And it's really nice that you guys have sprinklers because that whole strip there has no sprinkling at all. And when we arrived at because we've owned for 6 years, we've been here for 6 years. And when we got here at the beginning of July, the shrubs were wilted, the grass was dead. And, and I realized there's no watering there. And I know that the association has a lot of concerns and a lot of pressing issues and stuff like that. But I kind of would like to see maybe as something, a project down the road of considering, because that's not the only area that gets absolutely no irrigation at all. And that looks kind of bad because of it. And maybe on a long term, maybe look into making the whole project a lot more xeriscaped, a lot more, like drip irrigation. I don't know. And I Arizona, of course, has mastered this, because they've had to. But it just seems that it really looks bad. I mean, especially it makes me feel bad because all the golfers are going by and they look up to the right and there's the beautiful glacier course, and they look to the left and there's dead grass and it looks pretty shabby.
So did you say behind your unit? Okay,
Yeah,
So-
between the golf cart path
right,
and our deck,
right.
there's a whole strip of grass. That whole area has no irrigation at all.
Okay.
There's actually probably 5 residents who pull sprinklers.
Yes, and and
sorry.
then we are told we
We
can't
pull
use it.
sprinklers,
Yeah,
at
because
least 5 residents that I know.
Okay.
Well, yeah, in one situation, there's no irrigation
Yeah.
behind any
Any of the
Yeah.
units?
on property,
right.
but I understand what you're saying. Where
But it's not
that
like,
might be an area that we need to look at where we may need to do something because it's viewed by everyone.
yeah, and also it's not natural landscaping. Like, for example,
It's
at the end of
grass. Yeah.
Pinecone, if you're overlooking the greens, unless I'm not, I guess that's Camp Oak, when you're overlooking the green of, at the tees and the greens of the 4th hole. I mean, behind those units, yeah, there's no
but it's all pine trees and natural forest and stuff like that. No, ours looks like a tacky home that with shrubs that aren't maintained and grass isn't maintained and so.
So where are you? I want to see this.
Well, we're right behind, like I said, if you go to the tee boxes of
Yeah.
the seventh hole of Glacier Valley, Glacier, we're right on that strip. And we were watering and then, because we were one of the ones, because I thought, well, gosh, somebody's got to do it because these shrubs are going to die and the grass is already looking awful. And so we went ahead and started watering, but then we were told, no, we can't do that because we don't have automatic shut off timers. And I know a lot of our other neighbors are still doing it, but that hose that they have access to won't reach to our unit. So
Yeah, I want to talk about that topic here in a minute.
I think Stacey had a question first.
Oh, it's just a little one. There's a broken head in front of our unit. Do I just report that as a regular maintenance request?
I'll write it down right now, take care of it. It's broke
Where-
hard unit.
Uh,
589.
yes. It's when you first go down this concrete stairs and go up the
That
stairs.
road path right there.
It's right on the right. And it just like shoots out a little bit of water every direction.
Okay. You wanted to come back to that?
Yeah, I want to address two things. We started on, this is not a new. Both things that you mentioned are not new, xeriscaping or irrigation, one of the two. And you know, what I'd like to do is two things, and don't know where to go, get numbers again on, and maybe adding zones in a few places. And we'll go one-on-one later, and like east side of Gamble, we know what that number was last year. This is another place. There may be some others that are just that for one reason or another would be a priority to add zones to the sprinkler system. Again, we're gonna have budget pressures this year and it may not, but if you don't ask, you can be guaranteed you won't get an answer.
Might be an area, Mark, where we take an area and just take the grass out,
Well, and that's
put boulders in and some of that
The-
mulch
Pine
around it.
mulch?
the other thing that well, pine mulch is maintenance, but the other thing that, because you have to add it every year,
Oh, yeah.
but it's available. The other thing that we wanted to do this year, and unfortunately, we had 375 inches of snow at Purgatory and not much less here. Is we had 100 tons of river rock ordered or planned, budgeted, and that got axed. You said Arizona's got it nailed. Well, that's how they've got it nailed, is they've got it nailed by putting down weed block and gravel in places where you're just not going to get grass. We'll look at that again and come to the board this fall with a budget number and see how that falls in. But it wasn't 100 tons of rock with labor to put it down was $15,000. Now, 100 tons of rock will cover, I don't remember the metric, but you think that's a lot? But for our property, it's not. That would be a 10-year plan to do 100 tons every year. I think we need to put that back on for consideration to maybe start that program this fall again for next spring. But that would be a
Yeah.
prime location.
Mark,
Yes,
if I could cut in, I'd kind of like to reiterate a little bit of what Rick said, and I think we're moving in that direction. That, like, kind of our first grab as homeowners is if we have spots that are dry and ugly, is to look for additional sprinklers being put in. And I think our first consideration needs to be putting in xeriscaping. Brian has spoken about our water pressure situation. Every time we add, we draw down the water pressure, and that's not the direction as a committee that we were wanting to head anyway. And I would say that stretch there along number 7, it would be an ideal place to do some xeriscaping rather than trying to put in sprinklers. But again, I know it's all budget considerations, but I think as a committee, we should just always be thinking how do we do it without adding sprinklers and more grass to solve these issues.
And you know, in terms of the budget considerations, homeowners leaning on board members will not hurt board members' consideration of budget items. I'm not saying it'll make it work, but it won't hurt. And we've got a good group here today. This is probably the best group or the largest group we've had at a landscaping committee meeting. And it's really good because that's what matters, is what folks have to say. One other thing on your, I've looked at your place a lot, Diana, and the other thing that I think Diana is suffering from visually is my pet peeve is thistle. And you know, Glacier really hit the thistle this year. I don't know if people have walked around. God knows how much control they put down, but I don't know whether Glacier is getting pressure from the county or not. I suspect they are. That invasive thistle it's a noxious weed and it's a water consumer and it wins over everything else. But because they have hit so hard, I think that you're overlooking a lot of thistle that looks like this and it's
Yeah.
brown and.
Well, as a matter of fact, speaking of weed control, Glacier just yesterday morning, they had the little weed spray and they were spraying with thistles
Yeah.
right along that.
Well,
That's
I think that they have either they've realized it or they've gotten pressure. But the problem with this thistle, and we're going there now, it'll go to seed. And every flower will put out thousands of seeds. So it just is invasive and it takes over. But I know that outside your window, you can look down and see lots of bowing brown thistle.
But like I said, a lot of it was the wilted shrubs and kind of sparse.
Yeah. It would
weeds.
be ideal because one of the issues that were brought up to me by maintenance, and for example, going into Pinecone where you've got the erosion on either side of actually the one side of that would be a great rock place, like Glacier did coming into the front entrance
Right.
here. It looks great. Up at High Point where you turn into Peregrine, is that how it's pronounced? They've done it with rocks and wood chips. It looks great. No grass to mow. We just have to be careful we don't interfere. Same with boulders with snow removal.
Well, as a homeowner, I would very much support any kind of xeriscaping as opposed to just more sprinkling and more grass. Because I don't think there's certain spots in our project that I don't think grass makes sense, honestly. And plus golf carts go over, the grass and kill it, and so.
So regarding the thistles, I've been in contact with Mountain Studies and Colorado Native Plants. And there's an insect now that can be used to attack just Canada thistles and take them out.
Well,
So that might be something
Yeah.
worth thinking.
in the meantime, if that's good, we need to know what that is, and
Yeah, I'll find out
you
from
bring
the
that to La Plata County
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they're the policemen over
Yeah.
thistle. And we had Ben Baines from La Plata County out last year. He gave us a weed management plan. And 80% of the conversation was his concern over thistle.
It's everywhere.
And the story I've said a number of times is back in my days doing mine reclamation in the state of Wyoming. If the inspector came and looked at your crested wheat grass and looked at your blue grama, and then he saw that thistle, out came the violation pad with a $50 fine for each one that they found.
There's also a new head of Glacier Landscaping, or head of the whole thing. He came in this spring.
Yeah, Ziggy,
Pardon?
Ziggy. He came, here is it, Ziggy is the new
I
guy.
don't know his name.
It's not
Ziggy
like-
came last year.
Yeah.
He's not head of landscaping. He's
Head
the
of
superintendent
golf
of the golf
course,
course.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember his name. I went and saw him.
The other thing, let's just talk a little bit about, and a number of owners have talked to me about, they can or they can't water themselves out of the water closets. And I do. And Brian has set up travelers in the back of Gamble, and I'd give them, what, about a C+.
You know,
Um,
you gotta be monitored, you know, you gotta take ownership of that.
and then there's other places where I'm not sure whether you turn it on. I think owners turn it on and 8 o'clock at night when I'm out watering the dogs, I noticed the sprinklers have been on now for over 12 hours. And I go shut them off. So we've got an issue. But if an owner was, in my opinion, and I speak only for myself, if an owner was responsible and went and did their hour of water and then shut it off, that's good for the community. How do we manage it?
Is there any way that you can have a training and of how to do it properly? And then give those owners that are trained a key to the water closet?
Somewhat, and you know, here's another thing, some water closets are locked, and
Yeah.
there is just no. We need a uniform standard.
So we keep the water closets locked for a reason.
Well, I
Yeah,
think,
you
Mark,
know,
we need to,
They don't,
can't-
You,
some of
you
them
don't wanna do that.
So
I
we
won't
can't,
say which ones. Mine isn't, mine's locked.
so we
I'm not gonna rat on the other.
can't,
we need to understand as well that when you're in a drought situation like we apparently, I saw Gary's email. I've been away for 3 weeks, but saw Gary's email the other day that we got like the second rain in 2 months or whatever. There's no amount of watering that you can do that will make up for that kind of drought. You know, it just, you can keep it alive. But you can't make it look nice with that. You look at, you know, the volumes of water they put on the golf course, you know, that to keep the fairway green. Well, we can't begin to put that kind of volume on the lawns around Tamaron, and that's literally, you know, what it would take. So you have to be realistic also that if we're getting, you know, a decent amount of rain, then watering, you know, supplements it and it'll look nice. But in a deep drought like we're experiencing now, it isn't going to make that much difference.
I think this drought probably has instructed us that we need to move sooner than later to xeriscape.
Yeah, it requires water every summer, then.
Yeah.
That's not the answer.
it's,
Yeah, I spoke to Ziggy
Yeah.
last week and he said they used an additional 13 million gallons of water this year. At this point, over what they used last year.
Do we have any feel what our water usage is yet? Have you looked hard at any of the invoices?
I'll have to go back and look, but I can't tell you off the top of my head. And it's not good. So it's, I would, again, this is just me, but I would prefer not. This has just always been the protocol that we have. We don't give keys, especially to,
I can't hear you.
oh, we don't give keys especially out to, for this reason. We prefer to do the watering, but it's your call.
And it's unless somebody, again, I said, so how do we manage it? Unless we have to figure out a way to manage it, I don't think there's any other choice.
It's the board's call, but
Well, but, and
it's-
again, I don't think that anybody on the board has figured out how to manage it.
And
Okay, we
you're
don't.
you're gonna run into a problem if you keep those unlocked and kids get in.
Yeah.
Cause there's stuff in those closets beyond
Oh,
just
Lord.
a water,
You're
a
correct.
water
Yeah.
spigot.
It's-
You don't want people going in.
No.
It's inconsistent. Some are unlocked and some are locked. So what the situation, I'll tell you. Firsthand, what I faced in my unit as I looked out behind on our deck. Everything from our neighbors that way was dead and, you know. Cause it hadn't really been wet, including, like I said, the shrubs were wilting. And yet our neighbor, who has access to a water closet that is not locked, he's been watering his, he has, you know, and I mean, he feels like he's doing the association a good deed, and his doesn't look
Lock
a
it
lot
up.
better.
Yeah,
Look that one up.
But I'm
Hey,
just,
you guys asked about the water bills.
Yeah.
Or this time last year, the August bill was 41,000. And I just got the August bill for this month, it's 53,000.
There
And
you
we
go.
understand your frustration. We do. It's understandable. It's dry and it looks dry and dead,
Really bad.
but,
It did.
and we need some rain. And it's not pretty to look at. We get it.
Well, I think it, once again, we're going back to the point that maybe for areas that don't have sprinklers.
When
we
you
need
figure it out.
to-
Yeah.
Zero
Figure it
scaping,
out.
just go with zero
Yeah.
scaping, keep going with that.
Yeah.
Dan, did you have a question? Or a
As
comment?
Gary has stipulated, and I just want to be a little bit more definitive on his statement, most of these water closets are, we call risers in fire service.
Yep.
Because the risers feed residential life safety sprinklers on all the units. Somebody starts messing with it, turns on the valve. I will fill in the blanks for you. 'Cause you
Sure.
can Fill in your own blanks.
Sprinklers won't be working.
You need to be extremely careful. If you want water usage out of one of those, then you need to put a hydronized valve, which is a valve that comes out of the box, that you don't have to get into the box for residential use, and you'll want to allow residential use. But I really discourage you to allow people to access those boxes. Somebody may turn the lungs.
They've got 150 PSI in there. They're high pressure, and I imagine that's what it's for.
Oh, yeah, fire.
Yeah.
They're all designed for a specific flow and the distance from the head to the riser, et cetera.
So if someone leaves one off, there could not be enough water to help with the fire. So,
Well, it's Murphy's Law. We had 375 inches of snow and that cost us a fortune. And now we're not getting any summer rain and that's gonna cost us a fortune. Just so owners know, if the per unit price of water here, if it was your home, you'd be very conservative with your water. It's a lot more expensive than you pay in town for tap water at Cameron. It's, you know, in the 20 something dollars per thousand, if you can imagine.
Mark, given what Alyssa said, I would be considering turning the sprinklers off, honestly. The grass doesn't die, it goes dormant. It comes back, you know. And I know here, and I'm in Illinois, we often get into drought situation in August. We're not this year. Everything looks terrific here this year. But my yard is pretty densely sprinklered, and when it goes into the drought in August, a lot of times I just shut it off, let it go dormant. It'll come back, you know, later when it starts raining again. You know, spending an extra $10,000 a month and, you know, doesn't make a lot of sense to me when you're just barely keeping it green. I mean, that's for other people to decide. But if it was the money coming straight out of my pocket, I'd you know, keep the plants watered as best you can, but I wouldn't be too worried about the grass in mid-August in a drought, because you're just not going to do that much good watering it.
Alyssa, what was that water bill through? What period?
Okay, oops, 1 second. I believe it was for the usage in July. Can you hear me?
yes.
Yeah, okay.
So we'll get another one
Won't
this
be any
month.
better in
It
August.
won't be any better.
Right, it's gonna, yeah.
So I agree with Rick. And do we put out maybe a letter to all owners saying we need to conserve water? That would be good,
That's fine.
so they understand.
And I'm not sure all owners understand that we pay for irrigation water.
They don't.
I think they think it comes from a well or something.
But maybe.
Yeah.
that
And
needs-
certainly how much we pay.
Yeah. And how much zero escaping we can do if we turn off the water.
Yeah,
Yes.
Budget.
and then go to zero, and this is
So
what we need to
that's the
do.
conversation, but it's,
So what is what is your, what's? the
Well,
plan?
no hand water. I'm reserved to shut off all sprinklers right now as we're approaching the owner weekend. But maybe shut them off after owners week.
Okay, so shut off
Rick,
irrigation.
you thoughts on
I
that?
think it needs to be a discussion. That's, you know, that's all. And we're getting, you know, we're not that far from the time that people start to head out. You know, we're only a month and a half when people start leaving. And if we're talking, you know, I guess we'd have to go back and do the estimate on what it's costing us for sprinklering. And also look at what we can do to water the plants, because we don't obviously want them to die. So I don't think this is something you just do knee jerk, but it's just, you know, it needs to be in our bag of tricks here that we cut a lot of things that we felt were important out of the budget, you know, because we went over on snow removal, and now we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot, as we said, with the increase in the water bill. So we got to think about these things. That's all.
So we did increase irrigation to every day. We can always
Right.
go to
Every other
5 days or every other day or something to that nature. And Ryan can talk on that if he wanted to, but
Yeah.
you know, maybe to compromise or to do something to that nature, we can just.
Well, my point is, Paige, when we're not getting any rain at all, it's not going to do you any good. So you're just, you know, if you water less, then it's going to go dormant anyway, and you're just going to spend the money and not get any result. So it's kind of you got to go all in or not at all. Somewhere in between doesn't really do any good.
How long do we normally leave the sprinklers on? What's the length of the season?
You cut them off last week in September. October 1st.
We cut them off 3 weeks earlier. That's 3 weeks.
Okay.
That may make up for, because we'll have another 53, and without being too pessimistic, a good chunk of July at $53, we were going every other day.
Yeah, we were.
So we may see
August
being
15 days.
$70. $70,000.
So do you want to cut them off? When do you want to cut them off?
I Rick, you know, right after homeowners week, that'd be fine.
Well, when did you say we cut them off last?
October 1st.
October 1st, okay.
And that gives us 3 weeks of water bill.
So
Cut off.
the Durango weather guy, Jeff Gibbons, said starting next week, he sees a much more rich moisture pattern coming.
And if we start getting the heavy water, I just shut them off. You know, we gotta make up dollars here someplace.
See, you know, aside
Well,
to
right.
putting in more of these beds, like what we're discussing,
Planning.
you know, you have the
It says
one-time
it-
cost of putting it in,
Right.
you know, and sprucing it up once a year with chips or whatever. But you don't have the continual mowing expense.
Until then,
You eliminate that, you take out, you know, you put a bed along that back side and dress it up, you know, maybe put a couple of plants in or something. Then you eliminate that whole section from being maintained.
Well, it's a matter of budgeting, and it'll be brought up at the budget cycle this year. I think we've got more support than we had last year. We've had a drier summer than last year. People are seeing, and without getting into mega trends, I don't think what we're seeing this summer is gonna reverse itself over the next 20 years.
And, you know, if we had owners or groups of owners that just wanted to underwrite the installation of the bed, you know, the board would always appreciate that too.
Yeah, it's a conversation you have to have in each
Yeah,
community.
which is in the bed next to Rich's unit up there in High Point, most all those flowers have come from owners up there in High Point.
Right, and Margaret, that goes to what you're saying, have at.
Okay.
And Mark, Trish Layfield asked in the chat if turning on sprinklers will increase the fire danger.
Good question.
I think we're already in such a high risk of fire danger that I don't think that,
We're in the lowest level of drought in this area.
One of the things that Underwood said last year, and I spent a lot of time with him on the fire mitigation, is if you've got irrigation in the front of our building, he said he doesn't even recommend tree pruning for fire mitigation because you don't have a fire hazard. That goes to Trish's question. Good question. I don't think we're shutting it off. I think what we're saying is we'll shut it off when it cools off.
yeah,
And we'll shut it off if all of a sudden God gives us a whole bunch of rain. But we've got a long-term plan that requires action because it's just gonna get warmer and drier.
Well, I think this was just a good reminder of the wisdom of our xeriscape planning, that it's pay me now or pay me later. You invest in the xeriscaping, or you pay for it in water when you have a dry year. So it's this was a good reminder of that.
As much as we didn't like it, maybe this summer was a wake-up call.
I think there were some questions. Did y'all have questions?
Yeah, this may be for Brian, if we've installed these new sensors, it's kind of a moot point, if we get more rain, they're gonna shut off anyway, correctly?
The sensors will shut off, if we get a certain amount of rain, say a quarter inch of rain in a period of a few hours, the sensor will shut the system down for 72 hours.
Okay.
And it'll,
That's how my home works, I was just curious, what is the requirement to shut it off? So it's a quarter of an inch, and is that happening at all?
not yet.
We just have.
I just came back.
Yeah, well, someone told me that we had 3 rain cycles this year. I missed 2 of them. And the one that we had was just a popcorn cloud that came over and I don't know, maybe dropped a quarter of an inch or a half.
That's my only question, is it necessary to shut it off if it's gonna shut off naturally? But I mean, as an
Well-
owner, I have no problem with the grass.
Well, right
I mean,
now,
that's not a problem for me.
right now the sensors are what, just at High Point or
Gamble.
Gamble? Okay, so they're not,
Oh, okay, so it's not property.
it was an experiment this year, an experiment that's giving us no information.
I'm trying to be supportive. I look for an easy answer.
I'd say other work plan elements, but I think we've covered every element possible. Are there any other comments? Well, I wanted to thank everyone for on screen and in person for showing, and please come back. And tell your friends to come back, and tell your friends to lean on the board to begin the xeriscaping process.
Can I just make one last comment?
Sure.
Because at the beginning, when you were talking about the weed control, and you had said that if anybody has questions, wait till the end. And it's not a question or anything. It's basically a comment as myself, a homeowner. I am one of the people who support the weed control to make our properties look beautiful. And I just wanted to, it kind of occurred to me, in fact, yesterday morning was a good example of this. We are surrounded, for all those who would prefer to have no chemicals in our community, I respectfully suggest that they have chosen the wrong place to buy their property, their home, because they are surrounded by a golf course, 2 golf courses that use buku amounts of weed control, fertilizer, pest control, everything. And case in point, I just saw yesterday, right by our unit, a guy spraying for weeds, those, I think the thistles, right there along the tee boxes there from Glacier. And so if I just wanted to say that I think there are a lot of owners out there that do support the board and landscape committee with their trying to control our weeds and.
Again, I'm gonna be that other person. I just sent out to all of you on the landscape committee. Information about the toxicity of 2,4-D and some other chemicals and the effect by doctors and other vets than we had come in here. The effect on animals and you.
What do you
And
think the
I
golf
say,
course uses? What do
well,
you
I
think
know
the
the
golf
golf,
course
but
uses?
we should be responsible for our own thing. We should not be, saying, well, the golf course does it, so we should. So just
Saying it's a moot point. It's a
Well,
moot
okay,
point.
and look, we have a plan out there. It'll be
Yeah.
dealt with the
Yeah,
board.
organic.
And let me just say this as a board member, Rick's a board member, Stacy's a board member. We've got to strike a balance. And we're trying to do that. Rich is going to be running a study next year with organic materials. We'll see how that goes. We have to strike a balance. We have a responsibility to 100% of the owners, and it ain't easy. And it ain't easy, and I'll just leave it at that. We've got our mission statement. We've got to maintain this property, and we've got to maintain the property values. And I'll just leave it at that.
Just one comment. I'm in Pinecone also. Little blue and white stuff that's spread out. We've still got tons of thistles in along the edge of the flower beds. And we've got dandelions, little yellow flowers. So I don't think it was effective whenever.
There was no
There
weed
was
control in
pure
that matter.
fertilizer. There was
We
no
we
weed
did
control.
not do any weed control this year. That was just pure plain old, I think it was 2804 fertilizer. There was no weed control, and that is, the plan. It's that was written up and is online and is open for comment. We've got a lot of comments. Says that we'll go from a spraying type of application to the weed control to a granular. But to your point, and again, we've had a lot of comments. The granular material has to be placed down strategically, so you catch it before heavy rainfall, so it dissolves and is put to use. What you see on the ground that's still there means it isn't dissolved and it doesn't do anything. Now, one of the things that Dr. Brown brought to my attention early on, when we didn't have our application of Scott's this year, is he said he was noticing nitrogen deficiency in some of the grass. And what I've noticed, where it's getting water after the plain old fertilizer application, the grass looks pretty thick and green. But if it's not getting water, the fertilizer will not dissolve. That goes back to the long conversation we had before. Well, with that, if there aren't any other comments,
I just want to say thank you to the board, because I know this is an easy situation that they're in, and I don't think anybody appreciates it's a volunteer position. And I do, and I just want to say.
well, thank you. And
Yes,
again,
I support you guys, and thank you.
the objective is,
These guys.
And you guys are working. Thank you.
And I hope everybody knows that, we take brown grass just as hard as you guys do. So we see it, we hear it. So we're with you. It's not that we're not doing it. I don't know what else to do.
They're trying.
They are, every
They're
day.
out- They're
every
out
day.
there, they're
Thank
working,
you.
and we appreciate it.
Anybody who owns a home at home knows it's all on your shoulders. We know what
Yeah.
maintenance
And
is.
that's the
fact that the people that you have now working for you are the most polite, the nicest. They are very respectful and they're working hard.
Thank
And
you.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
We've
very
had very
much.
positive results up at High Point this year with any communication we've had with any of them. I just call it friends people.
We like to hear that.
Thank you very much for saying that.
We just had this huge hive of yellow jackets.
oh,
And they called the right.
well, so do I. They're right over my front door and they're yellow jackets. They're not wasps.
Have they
And
put a silver,
I don't want to touch them.
No, they called.
no, have they put a silver paper over it yet?
I don't want to touch them.
Guardian figured ours went in under our ceiling 10 foot.
I have very strong opinion about yellow jackets. My wife just ordered 2 more EpiPens.
I'll talk.
And they are very active in an area above my door. Ryan knows where they are. I don't want to touch them. I want to leave them alone. I'm afraid if I get them mad, they're gonna be all over the place.
Guardian did a great job and they knew the people.
No, and they came down and gave me the options and I said, leave them alone. Just leave them alone. If I don't bother them, they won't bother me. But there's a lot of them.
Well, they're going in under your seat.
They're all.
I've got them in my room
They're all
too.
over property.
Well, I'll close the meeting and say one thing. All you people that are complaining about hot, dry summers, I spent last week, 2 days between Corpus and Laredo inland. The other 2 days in North Texas, there's nothing to complain about.
I second that. I just arrived from Texas.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you both. very
Thanks,
much.
everyone.
Mark.